That day, after the meeting, I went to find Victor. Victor, always proper and well-groomed, was astonishingly wearing a bathrobe, his torso bare. I knew then. It was over between Victor and me. When I pushed open the door to Victor's lounge, my fingers paused on the metal handle. The girl wearing a man's shirt jumped up from the sofa, barefoot on the carpet, and smiled at me. "Hello, sister-in-law." Her voice was as sweet as if it had been soaked in honey. I didn't move. The sound of the shower came from the bathroom, the frosted glass showing Victor's shifting silhouette. Tonight was supposed to be our first date in half a year. I had even changed into the newly bought pearl earrings earlier. Now that pearl prodded my earlobe until it burned. "My name is Kathy." She tilted her head to show a snaggletooth, the hem of her shirt barely covering her thighs. "Victor Gidge promised to take me to the concert." She held up 3 fingers. "I promise I'll just be quiet and follow along, won't bother you." My heart suddenly felt like it had been pushed onto shards of glass. I've known Victor for 2 years and been married to him for 2 years. His private study has never been let into by anyone other than me, not even men. When our families arranged our marriage, I only thought it would be fine to treat each other with mutual respect. But one late night he grabbed the button of my nightgown, his breath hot, and said, "Maybe we didn't love each other before, but now I want to love you forever." Yet in this moment, it feels as if everything has changed. I'm not the sort to swallow my anger. I'm Celia. When there's a fire, I light it on the spot. I slammed the door hard. "Who gave you permission to come in?" The wooden frame was still trembling, the glass in Kathy's hand clinked against the coffee table, sending ripples across the surface. Victor stepped out dripping from the waist down, a towel hanging loosely at his hips. He glanced at the wall clock. Did the shareholders' meeting break up early? His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, the minty shampoo scent mixed with the residual heat coming off him. "This is Kathy." He swung the wet towel as he stepped toward the girl. "She just graduated. Uncle Jack back home asked me to look after her." I stared at him in silence. He realized I might be angry. Turning, he walked toward me and reached out to wrap his arm around my waist. I turned sideways to avoid him, the stiletto heels clacking on the floor, and sank heavily into the sofa. The leather cushion left indented creases. Irritated, I grabbed a throw pillow and slapped it back into place, the satin fabric hissing under my hands. "This is infuriating. Who's got nails for a butt?" The voice detonated in the room, making the bathroom glass tremble. The air in the room froze. Kathy bit her lip and shrank to one side. Victor's towel hung stiff at the damp ends of his hair. He balled the towel up and threw it at the coffee table. The metal frame clanged. "If you're in a bad mood today, we can just go home first." "Now." "Immediately." "Right away." I grabbed my bag and bolted for the entryway, then suddenly stopped short as I passed Kathy. "Miss Kathy?" He turned, the earring casting a cold glint. "I suddenly don't feel like going to the concert. We're going home. Do you want to come?" Tears ran in 2 tracks down Kathy's face as she looked at Victor timidly. Victor didn't respond. The girl, distraught, slipped out of the room. Victor and I never lost our composure in front of others. Years of work had taught us restraint. When he said we'd settle the disagreement at home, I nodded, one of our rare moments of tacit understanding. "She's just a little sister from my old village. The elders asked me to help take care of her. I only see her as a kid. What are you making a fuss about?" Victor cupped my face with both hands. "You didn't used to be like this." "What?" His voice caught in his throat. "Your lounge has always been open only to me." His pupils trembled, then he suddenly laughed, a sound more like a breath, his knuckles threading through my hair. When his lips brushed my forehead it set off a faint, ticklish thrill. "It's rare to see you jealous." The tip of his nose nudged my cheek, warm breath sweeping over my ear before finally resting against my lips and rubbing. "She's just my sister. That's all there is between us." Men often underestimate a woman's intuition. Even if Kathy and I had only had those few brief minutes together in the lounge, The indescribable look she gave Victor was something I saw crystal clearly. Kathy's feelings toward Victor were absolutely not innocent. "Madam." Chief Secretary Linda pushed the tablet toward me. On the surveillance feed, Kathy once again entered Victor's lounge. I stared at the bounce of her skirt. My nails dug deep into my palms. Linda's phone screen suddenly blocked my view. In the Instagram photo, the jade bangle gleamed coldly. In the lower right corner of the picture, the tie I had tied for Victor this morning lay draped over the sofa arm. "Brother says be happy at work." "Will do." The 2 red hearts following the caption pierced my pupils. For a moment, my emotions suddenly lost control. Reluctant as I was to admit it, Kathy had indeed struck a raw nerve. If not for years of cultivated professional restraint, I probably would have exploded on the spot. It felt like a freshly served cappuccino had a fly in it, suffocatingly foul. All I wanted in that instant was to bolt out, grab Kathy by the collar, and slap her a few times. But then I thought, it wasn't worth getting my hands dirty for a woman like that. I set Linda's phone aside and dialed Jia Jia, the Chanel counter salesgirl. Before long, the phone lit up with a ding. 3 photos of packing slips popped up in a dialog box, with a postscript: "The entire Coco Crush collection has been assembled for you, even the emerald and diamond piece that hasn't been shown on the runway." Outside, waves of clouds rolled by. A memory of Paris Fashion Week flashed through my mind, Victor helping me try on the bracelet at the show. Now that same bracelet was caught on the cuff of Kathy's chiffon blouse, the cheap fabric rubbing against the jade's curve. I pressed the intercom button. "The A-Wing banquet hall will open in 3 hours, then paused for half a second, use the corporate anniversary as the pretext, require all female employees to attend afternoon tea." When Kathy followed the crowd into the banquet hall strewn with lily of the valley, 40 Chanel attendants in white gloves stood in formation, each bearing a black velvet tray. The moment I took the microphone, the hall fell so silent you could hear the air being breathed. "Thank you all for giving your youth to the Lin family." My gaze swept over Kathy and paused for half a beat. "Tonight every lady may choose a piece of Chanel jewelry, of course, the interns are included as well." Amid the burst of cheers, I walked and stopped in front of Kathy. The jade bangle on her wrist flashed under the camellia chandelier like an ugly duckling among a flock of swans. "Miss Kathy seems to already have a favorite piece?" I said, smiling as I removed the diamond ring and flipped it over for her to see. "But a diamond is better after all." My fingertips brushed her shoulder lightly, "because it doesn't shine by relying on someone else's charity." The banquet hall's big screen began to switch over to an Instagram interface. In the posts thanking the CEO's wife, the women deliberately set emerald bangles next to Chanel jewelry to compare. The finance director's repost got the most traction. "No matter how valuable something is, if worn by the wrong person it loses its worth." Never underestimate women's ability to spread news. In less than half an hour, the whole corporation knew the CEO's wife had given Chanel jewelry to every female employee. As for the reason? The gossip squad in the banquet hall had already guessed most of it. Glances, half suggestive and half denying, kept flicking toward Kathy. The crystal chandelier suddenly swung, sending a blinding scatter of light, and Kathy knocked over her coffee. She suddenly staggered backward and darted out to the restroom. A few of the touch-up staff who were reapplying makeup caught sight of her. Their gazes were full of disdain. Kathy felt even more humiliated. She looked down, yanked the jade bracelet from her wrist and shoved it into her pocket, then hurried out of the restroom. A burst of raucous laughter erupted behind her. Victor ended the video call about the cross-border acquisition, the blue glow from the screen painting his face. From the corner of his eye he saw Kathy curled up by the planter outside the office, clutching a deep blue jewelry box, tears clinging to her eyelashes. "Tell me." Victor's voice made Kathy jerk to her feet. The box slammed onto the carpet. The jade bracelet rolled out, the very one he had given her. "Victor, this really shouldn't have been given to me." Kathy choked as she bent to pick up the rolling bracelet. "I was just taking a photo in the lounge during lunch, I only wanted a keepsake." She spoke haltingly about what had happened that day. "My sister-in-law misunderstood, I wanted to explain in person." Victor's tone dropped suddenly. I know. Kathy bowed her head lower, her sobs audible. Without another word, he led her out of the CEO's office. Walking through the office area, he saw several employees whispering together. Victor's Adam's apple bobbed as he suppressed his anger. He had always loathed the blurring of public and private matters. The door to my office was pushed open, Victor's neck veins standing out. Celia, why are you targeting Kathy? It was 3:17 in the afternoon when Victor led Kathy into my office. Kathy kept her head down, tugging at the hem of her skirt, shrinking behind Victor. I brought her here. If there's any misunderstanding, let's talk it out face to face, Victor said, frowning as he looked at me. Celia, Kathy is just a new intern at the company, and she's from the same hometown. The day before yesterday she said all the girls at the company are very pretty and she didn't have any nice jewelry to match her clothes, so I gave her a bracelet. It was that simple. I swayed the coffee in my hand, watching the steam rise little by little. I'm sorry, sister-in-law. Kathy suddenly bowed to me, her shoulders trembling. I've never received such an expensive gift before, and it was from Victor, so I took a photo. If I'd known it would make you angry, I wouldn't have sent it for anything. If there's anything you're unhappy about, you can tell me, and I'll definitely change. I set my coffee down and tapped the rim of the cup. Kathy? She sneaked a glance at Victor and answered timidly. This is a company, not a photo studio. If you want to learn photography, sign up for a class. My gaze shifted to Victor. Also, seducing your boss and getting fired isn't dignified. But I'm not someone who sits idly by. If anyone dares to flirt with my husband, I won't give them a second chance. When Kathy heard my blunt words, the tips of her ears flushed crimson. Her lips trembled, whether from fear or from crying too long, I couldn't tell. Celia, Kathy is here to apologize. Victor stepped a few paces closer to me. Having lived and worked together these past years, Victor knew my temper and my methods well. Since he once more insisted that Kathy had come to make amends, and since he was the one to step back to resolve the matter, I naturally had to allow him to save face. Fine. I pushed back my chair and stood. Let it not happen again, to anyone. You shouldn't have treated her that way. Victor spoke suddenly as he undid his cufflink. Moonlight coming through the bedroom window fell across his jaw. You know how important that bracelet is to me. You gave it to someone else without consulting me, and to a woman at that. Of course I'm angry. I was brushing my hair in front of the mirror, a few broken strands clung to the comb. You never used to be like this. In the mirror he appeared, picking up his whiskey. The glare on the glass made my eyes sting. I just saw how timid Kathy was at the office, he said, swallowing the rest of his drink. His Adam's apple bobbed. And she's from the same hometown, so I figured she'd understand. That's why I gave her the bracelet. Besides, it wasn't even worth that much, only $1 million. He thought what I cared about was money. Ridiculous. I was lacking in everything, except money. I stared at him for a long time. He stared back, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the bar, waiting for my response. I turned to take the vitamin from the dressing table. The foil made a harsh, grating sound. Victor, I'm obsessed with you, he said, suddenly straightening. Obsessed with your always smooth shirts, the neatly coated books in your study, your absolute fastidiousness about relationships. The tablet dissolved under my tongue, a faint sweetness rising. That compulsive kind of purity is what drew me to you. Moonlight was suddenly swallowed by clouds. Under the lamp, his palm brushed the nape of my neck. I only gave you a gift. No, this is what you taught me. I turned and bit his heated earlobe. When perfection cracks, it's no longer perfect, and it can't be fixed. I want you to love me forever. I'll love you forever, Victor said in a low voice. Victor was a person with clear boundaries and a steady head. Knowing that I minded, he stopped giving Kathy any special attention and treated her like a normal intern. Without special favors, Kathy's position at the assistant's office grew increasingly precarious. She used to be able to accompany the bosses to high-end dinners. Now even her access to the printing room had been revoked. Workplace currents are keenly perceptive. No one needs to instruct them. there are plenty who fawn on the powerful and step on the weak. In less than 2 weeks, the girl who used to come and go with Victor every day was reduced to sitting in a corner sorting files, completely drained of spirit. The mishap happened on the day of the quarterly audit. Kathy was crouched in the supply closet corner, sorting through 3 boxes of backlogged expense reports. Glue had dampened her sleeve cuff, and the pile of receipts on her lap was about to spill. That scene happened to fall into Victor's view as he came for the audit report. Under the white glow of the sensor light, Kathy fumbled to press the glue stuck in her hair. Victor stood silent, his gaze sweeping over the reddened tips of her ears. "Mr. Victor." Kathy's fingers trembled and the documents slipped through them. She didn't explain why she'd been assigned this task. After all, it was work she was supposed to do, and she should have been used to being ignored for the past 2 weeks. But when Victor bent to pick up the coffee-stained receipt, Kathy suddenly remembered the day she joined the company, Victor meeting her at the gate and offering her a coffee. She lowered her head, clamped her lips shut so hard, and the tears kept falling. After the meeting, Victor hurriedly pushed open the door, grabbed the items on the table, and hurled them to the floor. It was a wedding photo of ours. Glass shards scattered everywhere and grazed my collarbone. Red veins showed in his eyes. "Do you have to force her to resign to be satisfied? Celia, I've indulged all your baseless suspicions and tolerated your every bit of harassment." His speech quickened. "But does trampling on someone else's dignity fill your insecurity?" The scene from the last family dinner flashed before me. Word had it his cousin was being mistreated by her supervisor, and Victor had called the dean on the spot to demand answers. He has always loathed the abuse of power. "Celia, I'm warning you, this is the last time," Victor said, his tie crooked beneath his Adam's apple. "Touch Kathy again and I won't hesitate to have my wife replaced." Nearly 2 years into our marriage, the heir of the Lynn family, always in impeccably pressed suits, had for the first time loosened his tie and, to protect Kathy, lost his temper with me. Victor quickly sent a message to the HR director. Effective immediately, Kathy is transferred to serve as chief secretary to the CEO. Then the pen swept across Linda's termination agreement. The veteran employee who had once participated in the company's US IPO curled her trembling fingers. "You can't." "Can't what?" Victor tapped the screenshot on the monitor. "Do you want me to play what you did to Kathy in the pantry?" Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain poured down, and the new pearl earrings Linda had bought swayed at her ears. Linda went pale. She knew she'd been exposed for putting Kathy in a bind, and fear showed on her face. Victor was blunt. "You need to figure out who exactly you're working for." Victor slammed the table again, tore Linda's ID badge in two, and tossed it into the nearby trash can. Lynn Group doesn't need watchdogs that bite the hand that feeds them. Linda slunk out of the office. The assistants outside exchanged doleful looks and lowered their heads to pretend to be busy. "Take care, senior." Kathy steadied the office glass door and said to Linda. Just as the office door was about to close, Kathy suddenly leaned in and added, "Tell Mrs. Victor that from now on she can have me pick up the things she orders," and she flashed a grin that showed her canine tooth. During the Cold War between Victor and me, he'd been staying in a hotel. For these days, it had been Kathy who came to collect the change of clothes. Today, when she arrived, I was on the terrace trimming that dead blossom. The shears were stuck on a blackened stem. Kathy stood in the shadow of the entrance and said, "Victor needs 2 sets of linen pajamas." Her chestnut curls carried the dust from outside, and the sapphire necklace at her collarbone caught the light, the one I had returned last year for our anniversary. Before she left, she held up a QR code. Her collarbone caught the warm light of the hallway lamp. "Victor wants us to add each other. If anything comes up, you can contact me." Linda left, and Kathy took over her duties. I snapped the flower stem in my hand with force. Its sap splattered across the veins of the marble floor. "Get out." I had no mood left to fuss with the flowers. I turned and lay down on the sofa. The phone vibrated on the coffee table. The caller ID showed a number from back home. "Celia, it's your aunt by marriage," a hoarse female voice said, tinged with static. "Your cousin wants to get into your company. Can you swing him some manager or director position? I lay on the sofa on my side, holding the phone to my ear. I'll have HR take a look at it first tomorrow. You kid, what are you thinking? This isn't something you can decide on your own. How can you be so cold? Came the sound of peanut shells rattling against an enamel bowl through the phone. Back in your father's day. Anything else? I sat up from the sofa, my tone sharp with seriousness and anger. The voice on the other end grew cautious. Did you have a fight with Victor? Listen to Auntie, make a big dinner tonight. Husbands and wives don't stay mad overnight. Women shouldn't be so stubborn, admit you're wrong, soften a little, and it'll be fine. I hung up the phone quickly, growing angrier the more I thought about it. Ridiculous, why should I be the one to soften and apologize? After the fight, Victor never came back. But Kathy's short video account went from weekly posts to daily updates. 9 great afternoon tea shots in the best light and angles. An Hermes crocodile Birkin, captioned, someone said cherry blossom pink suits my complexion best. A champagne tower at the Sotheby's auction. Every video racked up a flood of likes and comments. The most popular clip showed her feeding koi while wearing a diamond necklace, a deep male voice warning in the background, the water's cold, don't go in barefoot. Likes and comments quickly surpassed 100,000. The comment section blew up with familiar faces. Isn't that the diamond necklace Mr. Victor bought in London for half a small goal last month? There were also a few fans urging for more content. When is Up's wardrobe vlog coming? My phone shook all day with people asking me what was going on. After all, I used to be the one attending these events with Victor, now it was someone else. But I didn't reply, smart people know why. I turned off the constant notification alerts and focused all my attention on coordinating with the lawyers. I frowned at the trust agreement spread across the long table. Years ago, to cement the business alliance, the two sides had placed 28 assets into a joint trust. Now we had to untangle those interlocking clauses, from tax shelters in Bermuda to offshore companies in the Cayman Islands, each item requiring meticulous handling. The top lawyer from Pujiang law firm pushed his glasses up for the third time and reminded me, Miss Celia, the 2 ski resorts in Canada. One early May evening I received a call from Victor, returning from London. Father wants you to come back to the old house for dinner. All right. We tacitly brushed past the argument and kept up a facade of calm. The driver picked up Victor at Pudong Airport first. Then he came to my place to fetch me, and we headed together to the old residence. When the black Mercedes stopped, I opened the door. Victor and Kathy, who had accompanied him, sat side by side in the back seat. The diamond necklace swinging at Kathy's throat stabbed into my sight. I looked away, closed the rear door, and opened the passenger side. Please don't take it amiss, sister. Victor said there's work he needs to brief me on, Kathy said, her hand resting on the crescent clasp of her Hermes bag. It just so happens I brought your favorite dessert, you can have some so you won't be bored. Her tone carried a honeyed apology, and the smile at the corner of her mouth was clearly growing hard to contain. In the rearview mirror Victor flipped through the financial reports, a fountain pen scratching across the pages. The car fragrance mixed with Kathy's perfume, making the temples of my head throb. Turn the air down a bit. Victor suddenly loosened his tie. Kathy immediately leaned forward to adjust the vent and the temperature, the lace cuff brushing the back of Victor's hand. I pressed the window button and the May evening breeze rushed in. In the rearview mirror Kathy was touching up her makeup, drawing a perfect arc of lipstick. The smile at the corner of her mouth grew more pronounced. When we arrived at the old house, father-in-law Richard was bent over trimming the flowers and plants of the courtyard plum tree. Kathy hurried forward and took the scissors. Uncle, your taste is still so unique, these flowers and plants look beautiful under your pruning. She set the scissors on the ground and went to the nearby table to lift a teacup. Richard heard Kathy's compliment, a smile deepening at the corner of his eye, and took the black tea Kathy handed him. At the rosewood round table, Kathy was describing Victor's nail-biting negotiation over the billion-dollar London order. Richard nodded frequently, casting admiring looks at Victor. I was a little absent-minded, listening in a daze. For some reason Kathy mentioned the night of Victor's stomach attack, How she had gone out at 3 in the morning in the rain to buy a shirt and had personally helped him change into it. The ding sounded abruptly and I only then came back to myself. Richard put down his spoon, picked up his chopsticks and took a bite. Kathy flashed a dimple, as if realizing she had said the wrong thing. Not stupid enough, she knew she'd misspoken. Victor lowered his head to cut his steak, silent. I pushed the soup bowl in front of me aside. Dad, I'm pregnant. Really? Richard slammed the table in excitement, making it rock. He adjusted his glasses and looked closely. Which hospital did you get tested at? The man who had treated me like air since I sat down suddenly looked at me with a solemn expression. I watched his taut jaw with keen interest. The examination at the People's Hospital yesterday, 3.5 weeks. Richard stood up in a hurry to go to the ancestral hall, saying he had to tell the ancestors and Victor's deceased mother. Kathy suddenly turned her head, her crystal earring swung. But for the past 2 months, Mr. Victor has been accompanying me to inspect our overseas branch offices, hasn't he? Richard stopped in his tracks when he heard that, glancing back and forth between me and Victor. I had an expert test it specifically. It's 3.5 weeks, I emphasized the time point. Veins bulged on the back of Victor's hand. Celia. He couldn't keep a calm expression, his eyes darkened and his Adam's apple bobbed. I laughed out loud. How wonderful, Victor, you're going to be a ready-made father. Shut up. His palm came down hard on the dining table. I pushed the prenatal check form across the turntable toward him. While you and your lover travel the world, I need my distractions too, I said, glancing between him and Kathy. Those 5 male models had great bodies, we partied all night on the yacht. I'd like to know who the father is. But now even paternity tests need appointments and cues. Of course, if you're willing to be a ready-made dad. With each word I spoke, Victor's pupils narrowed a little more. Enough. He shot to his feet, the chair toppled over with a heavy crash onto the carpet. I ignored my anger toward Victor. I placed a hand on my belly and laughed softly, pointing at the tie on his chest. That green hat goes surprisingly well with your dark green tie. Victor could never have guessed. In front of his father, I would slam the prenatal test report down in front of him and tell him the child wasn't his. I have never betrayed this marriage. Victor's neck tightened, his knuckles white. Clearly that heavy blow shattered all his composure. Those were all work functions, I didn't even touch her fingertips. I turned my gaze elsewhere, too lazy to watch his pretentious act. Kathy posts your late-night work meals on her short videos every day, Victor. Are you telling me you didn't know? Even your cousin messaged me to warn me about you, your secretary, and you still think you're handling things with proper restraint? If you can take her around the world on a honeymoon, of course I can find someone else to ease my loneliness. The crystal ashtray shattered on the floor. Seeing Victor's helpless fury, I laughed. What a pity, Victor. I was supposed to bring a man to meet you, but I didn't expect you'd put on this show first. Victor was trembling all over. He always maintained that his relationship with Kathy was completely above board. Beyond accompanying her to various events, they never crossed the line between superior and subordinate. He couldn't understand how we'd ended up like this. Not long ago, he'd tucked the blanket back around me when I'd kicked it off. Mrs. Celia, Mr. Victor, and I are completely innocent. Kathy pressed the silk handkerchief to her eyes. Mrs. Celia, last time when I accompanied Mr. Victor to entertain guests, it was you who said you didn't want to go. These things really aren't within my job description, but Mr. Victor said an executive assistant should do everything, so I. Kathy shifted half an inch toward Victor as she spoke, her earring swung and made my eyes sting. Do everything? On the way here you and Victor sat in the back, you sat next to him, and you let the CEO's wife take the passenger seat. Where exactly did your doing everything go? Into the dog's belly? I loosened the silk scarf at my neck to breathe. Kathy went silent in an instant, looking at Victor as if pleading for help. I turned to Victor and sneered. Is this the executive assistant you personally trained? Linda has been with you for 12 years, handling all your affairs big and small. Have I ever had any doubts? Victor helplessly steadied himself on the chair, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed every excuse, and in the end he said nothing. Victor, let's get a divorce. Victor dragged me through the iron gate. Kathy was left at the doorstep of the old house. Separated for 3 months, this was his first return. The Persian rug that used to hang under the eaves had long been stored away in the shed, and the parrot we kept was sold at the bird market. Victor stood in the foyer without moving. The home he'd lived in for 2.5 years smelled entirely of dust now, and his fingers pinched my wrist until it hurt. He finally understood. The divorce I suggested wasn't a threat. Celia, I didn't sleep with her, his Adam's apple bobbed as he pinned me to the wall. Get rid of the child, and we'll have our child again. I watched a startled sparrow outside the window and laughed. On what grounds? His brow tightened. Why don't you believe me? I pried open the fingers whitening around my wrist. Of course, I know you didn't cross any physical line. But so what? You let her use your private lounge, the one I designed and furnished. You've never before allowed anyone other than me to use your private lounge. You knew I'd be upset riding in the car, yet you still let her sit beside you. You know exactly what each gesture means, and yet you did it. Because you used her as a weapon, waiting for me to crumble and show weakness. I cried as I thought about the past. I never imagined our marriage would end so quickly. You saw her feelings long ago, didn't you? I warned you, Victor. Deliberate wrongdoing is more hateful than an accidental mistake. Victor staggered and gripped the pillar by the foyer, the lines of the plaster surface pressed into his palm. It's my fault, Celia. She looks afraid when she lowers her head and twists her fingers, just like Evelyn. I'm afraid that because of you, she too will turn into Evelyn. Evelyn, Victor's cousin, they grew up together and were very close. While studying she was pushed down by her supervisor and developed depression, which she still hasn't recovered from. I can't bear to see those eyes cry. But I've never felt anything more than that. Watching tears well at the corners of his eyes, I calmly turned and walked toward the bedroom. Maybe he truly can remain pure and faithful, but I won't risk someone losing their mind for him and directing a poisoned blade straight at my heart. Victor refused to sign the divorce papers. He unusually promoted a capable male executive assistant. The study light burned on until 5 in the morning, the ashtray was packed with butts, bottles toppled every which way. When I pushed the door open I saw him slumped over the desk, asleep, his tie crooked around his neck. This man normally kept himself proper even when drunk, now his shirt was terribly rumpled. As I bent to gather the glass bottles, he suddenly seized my wrist. His palm was alarmingly hot, his hoarse voice laced with the scent of alcohol. Celia, can we not get a divorce? If you want this child, then have him. As for Kathy, she still held the title of first assistant. But people in the workplace are the best at reading which way the wind is blowing. On the new assistant's first day in office, the supervisors who used to rush to carry her bag now gathered in the break room and laughed loudly. When Kathy burst into my office, even thick foundation couldn't hide her dark circles, and the cuff of her coat was still stained with coffee. We met at the annual party. I handed you a glass of champagne, bent over standing behind your chair, and listened to you and Victor discuss the charity auction's final lot. You didn't glance at me once from beginning to end. That you could marry him, doesn't that just mean you were born lucky and married into the right family? Otherwise, who would even give you that chance? That day in the lounge, I deliberately stained my clothes with coffee as an excuse to go to the lounge. I knew that lounge was a place only you could enter. I said I'd change and be out soon, wouldn't take long. Victor just smiled and said, fine. I raised my hand, picked up the remote on the desk, turned the glass to its lowest transparency, and casually adjusted the back of the chair. Kathy's fingers trembled with rage at my nonchalant attitude, her eyes full of surging hatred. What gives you, a trust fund rich kid, the right to look down on me? Kathy tore open her coat. Victor will see through you sooner or later. The only one who deserves to be by his side is me. You're not worthy. Is that so? I propped my chin on my hand and looked at the dirty camisole dress peeking out from under her coat. So you have him now? Of course I have him. Of course I do, otherwise why would you be getting a divorce? She suddenly leaned toward the desk, both hands braced on its surface, her gaze fixed on me. I lifted the cup beside me and took a sip of water. You don't know why we're divorced? Or didn't you read that medical report clearly? Kathy was left speechless, choked by my words. Kathy's emotions nearly spiraled out of control. That old hag with a bastard, who does she think she is, acting all high and mighty? Victor will soon, she jabbed at my belly with a fingernail painted hot pink. With no mercy I splashed the water from the cup into her face. Who do you think you are, daring to judge me? I snatched the glass away and circled to stand in front of her, then slapped her across the face with the back of my hand. You deserved that slap. I've wanted to do it for a long time, you idiot. I grabbed a wet wipe and wiped my hand. Now take your pathetic acting and get out. Victor finally gave in. Under family pressure, Victor signed the divorce papers. The premarital assets were clearly divided, but the Lin and Sue family business empires were already deeply entangled, and some ventures still required joint handling. The child was born prematurely, but from birth until now his health has been excellent, no problems have arisen. My mother keeps pressing late at night about the child's biological father. I have remained silent. The fictitious male model story I once made up was long ago seen through, but the truth no longer matters. As the only daughter of the Sue family, my child automatically became the sole heir. When the child was still very young, my parents began teaching him to recognize stock certificates. I told them that he can't even read yet, so what's the point, but my parents, as always, delighted in doing it. As the little one's features relaxed, the jawline came to resemble that of someone I once knew. Without the constraints of marriage, life felt oddly free. The group's day-to-day affairs were left to professional managers. Victor handled the major decisions. I only needed to attend the briefing meetings. There was plenty of time, and life was vivid. Over the years I even collected a few blonde, blue-eyed little lovers. From the secretary's regular video briefings I picked up fragmented news. Kathy couldn't last even half a year, she couldn't stand it and left. But everyone in that circle is well informed. No company would dare hire her anymore. Later I heard she went to Lin's to cause a scene again and was escorted out by security. She was hit by a car as she left the building, and her fate after that was unknown. Over the past 2 years Victor has become increasingly focused on the company's development, using ruthless measures to reform the group. They call me home every quarter to preside over the financial report meetings. I know what they're thinking and I don't expose them. Letting them have their way on this matter is fine, after all, we're old. But there won't be another chance. After every meeting Victor would wait by the revolving door. He said he was bringing tea to the old man, but really he was waiting for the little brat to rush over. No one knows who taught him, but Victor calls him Daddy. Now whenever he meets someone he holds up his smartwatch and shouts to call Daddy on video. No matter how busy Victor is he always answers, his voice soft in a way that doesn't suit him. As the little brat grew, the mole at the corner of his eye was exactly the same, not a hair off. I always go home to spend mid-autumn with my parents. Victor rents the neighboring estate and works remotely. He asked if I wanted to give the child a complete family. I shook my head. A besieged city is best left unentered. As for the little brat, he always paints the family portrait as the three of them holding hands. Every time he sees Victor he gets excited. At meals he insists on sitting between Victor and me, feeding me pancakes with his left hand and feeding Victor bacon with his right. I tap his forehead to warn him not to push his luck. From the corner of my eye I catch Victor's eyes reddening. He probably has something to say. But I no longer want to listen.